So our first speaker for today, Alex Bosworth from Lightning Labs. Please welcome Alex.
Cool. Hi. I'm Alex Bosworth. I'm Lightning Infrastructure Lead at Lightning Labs. And I wanted to talk today about liquidity. So right off the bat, I wanted to kind of address kind of a misconception that people have that if I'm sending on the Lightning Network, it's always going to be cheap. And that's kind of like an aspirational goal. I myself have been guilty of saying, oh, just send it on Lightning, it's going to be free. But actually, there is no such thing as a free lunch on the Lightning Network because we have this scarce resource. And the scarce resource is liquidity. And so what does that mean? What does liquidity mean? Liquidity means when I create a channel and I fund it with a bunch of coins, that these coins can only be used like one at a time. So if I load up a channel with $100, I can only spend $100 before $100 comes back the other way. And because that can only be used one time, that makes it a scarce resource until it comes back. So because it's a scarce resource and multiple people may want to use this resource, there is a cost associated with that. It becomes its own kind of asset. And there's another cost that's associated, which is it takes me time and effort to really put that together. So I have to pay a chain fee to get this capacity committed to on the Lightning Network, and I have to kind of like watch this channel to make sure that it's doing good, and I have to watch my node. That makes a Lightning Network different from like the classic Bitcoin network model of altruistic forwarding. So on Bitcoin, you have a node. Why do I help you move your transaction towards the miner? Why do I help the miners move their blocks towards all the other peers? I'm not getting anything from that. It's an altruistic model. And the reason that works is because it basically costs me nothing. And it's the same thing in Lightning. So if we're moving very small amounts of money, then yes, being a very cheap network is feasible on the altruistic model. But as we start to add more and more money, then we start to have to pay more and more fees. And so that's something that we want to reduce, right? We want to get closer to this model where I can send money anywhere in the world and it can be super, super cheap. And there's all these technologies that we can use to like make ourselves more efficient. Like we can use multi-path payments, but fundamentally, none of these technologies. I hope you're not waiting for them. I hope you're not waiting. You're saying, oh, when multi-path payment comes, that all my payments will become free. Because fundamentally, there's still this resource. It's a scarce resource. There's still these costs that node operators are paying. There's still costs that you are paying. And there's another solution that we need to make things cheap, which is a market solution. We need to make sure that the capital is allocated in the correct ways. And in order to make a great market solution, we need to really focus on costs and benefits. So what are the costs of setting up a node, of being a node operator? I've been like a node operator and routing like basically since the beginning. I've made kind of like a chart of like from worst to best case scenarios. And unlike the Bitcoin network where it's altruistic, when you load up a Bitcoin node, you're not going to really lose anything. But in the case of Lightning, you set up some channels, and there's some cases where you could lose money. And what are those cases? So one case is that there's a force close. So every time you set up a channel, there's the potential that this channel you could become uncooperative with your peer. And if you become uncooperative with your peer, you have to kind of go to court. You have to go to the blockchain and settle like, okay, we had this one state before that we negotiated that was good. But if you do that, you're going to pay higher fees, and potentially you're going to get your funds locked up for maybe weeks. So that's the worst case scenario. That's the most cost that you could see. Some people have like really drilled into this, like to think about like what are really like in numbers your costs and what are your benefits. But I'm going to say that in like empirically in my node, one of the other big costs is that I create a bunch of channels to people, and there's just no activity. So I made this channel to somebody who's maybe an enthusiast on the network, and or even maybe somebody who's got a node that's receiving a lot, but everybody else has created channels to that person. And in that case, I can also lose some money because I lose some time, some opportunity cost of my capital, and I also lose. I spent some chain fees to create this channel, and there was no real reason for me to do that because there's no activity on the channel. But also, this is where things start to flip. So unlike a Bitcoin node, we actually have a way to make money by running a node. That's different from a Bitcoin node where you just pass along transactions. You actually, if you are doing a good job, we can go from a loss situation actually to a profit situation. And as we go down this chart, if you have a channel that has high activity, and I'm gonna talk about activity in terms of fees basically, because if you're routing a bunch of very, very tiny payments, and maybe you're charging a percentage fee, even if you have huge numbers of payments, unless you're making high fees, then you're not making profit. So that's like the good case scenario. So I mentioned that liquidity itself is kind of like a new asset to think about. So you have your Bitcoins, but now you also commit your Bitcoins into these channels, and you have a new kind of asset, a scarce asset, that gives you some utility, and other people can then kind of pay you to get that utility. And I hear people talk about that I've got my channel set up, and I need to rebalance. So I need to make sure that I'm always keeping my channels in balance. And I kind of want to drill into what that means exactly, because it can mean different things. So sometimes people think, I just need to run a script that's going to rebalance my channels. And let's take a look at, in a very simplified case of what this looks like. So imagine that I'm the blue node, and I'm able to pay to the store. So I have this utility where I can pay to the store, and I can also route payments to the store. So the red node cannot pay to the store. So I have the liquidity, and he doesn't have the liquidity. So maybe the red node thinks, I need to rebalance. I have zero liquidity to the store. I can't pay to the store. I need that utility. So in a circular rebalance, it's rebalancing only over the Lightning Network. What the red node can do is the red node can pay to the blue node, and the blue node pays to the store, and the store pays to the red node. And that's a circle. And the effect of that circle is that now the red node can pay to the store, and the blue node can no longer pay to the store. So that's actually kind of like a market action. The blue node has a price that they are charging to pay to the store, and the red node pays that price, and now he has that liquidity to pay to the store. And why would he want to pay to the store? Why would he want that liquidity? There's multiple reasons. Maybe he doesn't want to be dependent on the blue node to pay to the store. Or it could also be that he thinks that the rate that the blue node is charging is too low, that the blue node is charging $1 to get to the store. But he thinks, oh, this store is going to release some amazing new stuff, so I'm going to charge $10 to get to the store. So he's participating in this market of liquidity, and he buys the liquidity from the blue node. So that's what circular rebalancing means. It means like a zero-sum game, where I take some of your balance, and that's also why it doesn't mean that you can just run a script and solve all your balance problems, because one person runs it, and then another person becomes unbalanced potentially. So the way around this balance problem is we need an external settlement mechanism. Anytime we're doing a purely in-network system, we're always going to have these flow constraints. So what's an alternative that the red node who wanted liquidity to the store could do? He could open up a new channel. And opening up a new channel is using the external settlement mechanism of the blockchain. So he's saying, I'm adding more capital in the direction of the store. But that's not always possible. Some nodes don't accept more than one channel, because he's already got a channel. So like a C Lightning node wouldn't accept a new channel. Or maybe a node, just in its own policy, they don't want too many channels. Or it could be the other way. It could be that there's inbound liquidity that he wants, and then the circle goes in the other direction. And we don't currently have a way to ask people to assign inbound liquidity other than this method. So this is kind of like our market. The market is, I think that there's going to be a need for some liquidity in a direction of something. So I make an investment, I make a channel, or I buy some liquidity from somebody else, and I get that liquidity towards the source that I think in the future it's going to be useful towards. But at the moment, we have a kind of a weird market. So in a normal market, if you have different items, so like let's say we have this market where we have apples and bananas, and in the Lightning Network, we would have if you would come along with some apples and bananas, you would go to the vendor and you'd say, I want a cherry or I want a pear, and the vendor would say, okay, an apple or a banana gives you one cherry, and an apple or a banana gives you two pears. But in our current marketplace, we have no way to differentiate between apples and bananas. We have no way to differentiate between different sources of liquidity. So I couldn't say, well, an apple gives you one cherry or one pear. I couldn't say, that apples and bananas are different. So I can't say that my inbound liquidities are different. And that creates actually kind of like a weird market where I have to treat all liquidity as kind of the same thing. And because it's a weird market, it's a less efficient market, and this is something we need to think about, like how can we make just a market action so good that the capital is going to be allocated in the correct places. And one workaround that currently works is you could just set all of your fees on the outbound side to be equal, and then you can only think about the inbound side. So like if I'm acquiring inbound liquidity, because of the single pair market, I don't know if that inbound liquidity is going to make me money in the future on a good route or a bad route. So it makes it hard for me to justify a purchase of inbound liquidity. But if all of my outgoing channels are the same fee, well then I can figure it out. I can do the math. So that's something that I think that we can improve in the future, to add more pairs, to make a pairwise market, just like all regular markets are. I think that will improve the efficiency of the market, and will also let us open up to external settlement mechanisms, so that if you're running like a side chain, you're running some different chain, that you're not forced to treat those two incoming assets as the same thing. The other major cost, other than chain fees, is really your time. So I think that's like one of the main components of the cost of being a routing node operator at the moment, is that I load up a Lightning node, and I have to invest time in becoming educated about what liquidity means. I need to invest time in writing programs to make sure that my liquidity is being allocated efficiently. And I have fun doing that, but I'm going to get bored of it. So I've got other stuff to work on. So something I've been working on is called Balance of Satoshis. And my high-level goal for Balance of Satoshis is to just do everything for me and don't bother me. And the things that I really want to care about in terms of my node are, I want to know if there's some kind of high-level problem, like it's offline, and I want to know about high-level capital decisions. So it needs more money, or it has too much money and it needs to go off, I need to move some money somewhere else. So that's my high-level goal, is to try to make this, try to reduce that cost of operations. So what are things that I'm looking at with my Balance of Satoshis tool? There's a lot of things to analyze when you're running your node. So you need to be looking at, am I making money off of these channels? Are these channels just in that no activity state? Or are they in the high activity state? What peers am I using to send my money or to receive my money for my business? Are people making new channels with me and my liquidity is changing? Do I have a peer who is just offline and I need to force close with them because I've had my money allocated to them for 6 months and they haven't been around? Was there a channel close and now I lost liquidity to an important source, so I need to create a new channel to restore that liquidity? Is there something weird that my peers are doing with their policies? Maybe they've jacked up the prices on me, so now my inbound liquidity is way higher than it used to be. So that's something that the Balance of Satoshis tool is something that that's like a goal that I've had for the tool, is to try to like package all that information into something first that can make it easy for me to understand what to do about it, and then later I can think about how this can be automated, how I can say, I'm making a lot of fees off of this peer, so I should add more liquidity to that peer. I don't want to be making that decision myself. I just want to set up some rules where it just happens, and I only have to know about things when they go wrong. I talked about this before, which is how do I manage my liquidity? One way is through circular rebalancing. And before I said that circular rebalancing is pointless. And it is pointless from the high-level perspective of the flow graph. If one person is getting liquidity and another person is losing liquidity, so we're not actually making the payment any more possible to reach its destination. But that ignores the concept of the market. The market is deciding where liquidity should be put. So when I'm doing a circular rebalance, I'm telling the market where capital needs to be. So I'm giving a signal to that other peer, oh, look, you just forwarded a payment to that store because we're doing a circular rebalance. So you need to be, if you've got any extra capital, you should be assigning it to the merchant because you just made some money there. So even though, at the high-level view, we're not solving problems, at the market-level view, at the economic view, we are solving problems. And even technically, we are solving problems potentially in the world without multipath payments. And even in multipath payments come with kind of an additional expense. You can't just infinitely multipath payment. Multipath payment has limits. And I can kind of demonstrate with this diagram, if you have the blue node, so the blue node has 2 channels to the yellow node. And in these 2 channels, he has 1 Bitcoin on his side in two different channels. And then from the red node, he has 1 channel, which is depleted. He has two Bitcoins on the other side of the channel. So let's say this blue node wants to service larger payments. He wants to say, you don't have to split up your payment when you go through me. I can do the full 2 Bitcoin payment. So currently, he can't do that. He only has 1 and 1. But what he can do with a circular rebalance is he can do 1 circular rebalance through the yellow node back to himself, and then he could do another circular rebalance back to himself through the yellow node. And now he's kind of defragmenting his liquidity. He's saying, I'm condensing my liquidity up, and now I can make a 2 Bitcoin payment. Before I couldn't. I was limited to 1 Bitcoin payments. So that's something he could do not just for himself, but also, let's say that he's a market actor. He wants to be a great routing node. And he doesn't want, when people hit him, that he's going to be depleted in any one direction. He wants to have a good reputation in their pathfinding systems. So he could make that decision just from the perspective of quality of service. Another tool that I've been integrating is the Lightning Loop service. And the Lightning Loop service is a way to kind of break these flow constraints. So let's say I just spin up a node, and I can't do a circular rebalance because as a new node, nobody's assigned liquidity in my direction. So I'm a prisoner of the flow constraints. There's nobody to trade with for that liquidity. So with Lightning Loop, what happens is I've got all the balance on my side, and there's another node that I want to have incoming liquidity with. So I pay through my peer to the Lightning Loop server, and then the Lightning Loop server sends me back on-chain using external settlement and non-custodially locked to the same payment hash so that I can increase my total inbound liquidity. So that's something that I find useful in situations where I just want more inbound liquidity. Another thing I've been working on is trying to take all this information and all these tools and kind of map them together so that automatic actions are taken. And we already have something like that in L&D called Autopilot. But Autopilot is at a stage where if you use it, I would recommend that you're directing it. And the Autopilot itself isn't necessarily making the decisions, but what it's doing is it's saying, okay, you've given me these guidelines, and I know about these nodes that you want to have liquidity with, and I'm going to automatically be adding new liquidity in that direction. It does have an internal mode that it can make decisions itself, but I would recommend not turning that on. I would say use external scoring. And so one thing that I've used in my tool is this concept of mirroring other nodes. So if I want to like have great channel partners, I mean, and sometimes people ask me, or they like accuse me, like, oh, Alex, you know about all the peers that are the best peers to connect to, and how are we going to know that? We're just simple people. We don't know who to connect to. But the thing is, you can just look on the graph, and all that information is public. All of the information about who I have liquidity with or who I have capacity with is public information. And so I've added a tool in Balance of Satoshis to tell the autopilot, hey, this node looks like they're a good routing node. So I want to copy all of their channels. And I've also made it so that you can choose a number of different peers, and you can say merge together the set of all of these different peers, and they all have really good liquidity. So copy them. Yeah. So the other thing I would say is just like keep track of things that are external to the system. So like look for new stores and look for things that are happening outside. Look at chain fees. Balance of Satoshis also has support for that. And make sure that your security is being monitored, because that's also part of the major cost of operating a routing node. You have this hot wallet, so you don't want to just give away for free the ability to like the cost that you're bearing in terms of security, and so we need to make things more secure so that they're cheaper. Okay, I ran out of time, so here are my like closing notes. If you're building on LND, please email me, alex@lightning.engineering. I try to get people on the same page about what's happening with LND, and you can look at my scripts for how I'm managing my LND. They're all MIT licensed. It's open source. And then you can use Lightning Loop, also client open source. So thanks.